As I'm sure you're all aware by now, the M16A3 has received a nerf in the most recent update. It has long been considered one of the meta assault rifles in Phantom Forces, and the nerf given to the M16A3 raises a few questions about what assault rifles will be more viable as a result of this nerf. Take, for example, the biggest competitor to the M16A3, the C7A2. This weapon was one of the strongest assault rifles in PF when it first got added, and outclassed the M16A3 in almost every single way, but the C7A2 has since been nerfed, while the M16A3 and the best attachments for it have since been buffed. As a result of this, the M16A3 became much more accurate than before, and there has been very little reason to use the C7A2 for about a year now. With the most recent nerf to the M16A3 and the Muzzle Break attachment now in place, it's now on much more equal footing with the C7A2. So, which of these two rifles is better now? What attachments work best on them? And is the M16A3 still meta after this? Well, that last question is very easy to answer. The M16A3 is absolutely still meta. It's not intended to be insanely good at any one thing. The most important part of what makes this gun work is that it is an excellent generalist assault rifle that's good at pretty much everything. It's consistent, it's reliable, and it has no real weaknesses, essentially being the embodiment of the assault rifles as a whole. What made it so popular in the first place is that it's the most consistent and the most reliable, with the fewest weaknesses of any gun in its category. These nerfs did not give it any true weaknesses, they simply aimed to reduce the M16A3's strengths to make other assault rifles worth using, and even they didn't do much to trim down its dominant niche in its weapon class. So overall, I place the M16A3 in low S tier. It's never been so overpowered that it's genuinely unfun to play against, but it's pretty much always there when you need it. However, this nerf took the already narrow power gap between the M16A3 and the C7A2 and reduced it even further, decreasing the M16A3's 4-shot range from 125.5 studs to 119.5 studs, making it now completely average for an assault rifle with a finite 4-shot range. This is, however, still slightly more than the C7A2's 4-shot range of 116 studs. So what else did these nerfs change? Well, they reduced the M16A3's penetration to 1.1 studs, which did absolutely nothing, and they reduced its muzzle velocity to 2700 studs per second, which again did absolutely nothing. Like, yeah, big fucking deal, I have to leave my shots like 1% more at 300 studs, who cares? Probably the most impactful nerf the M16A3 received this update was that, get this, its reload is now a 1/10 of a second longer. You can barely even notice this change, but it technically means that the C7A2 actually reloads quicker than the M16A3 again. And since reload speed is an extremely important stat for all assault rifles, this change is probably the most meaningful out of any of the direct nerfs to the M16A3. However, by far the most impactful change of this update that actually affected the M16A3 was the Muzzle Break nerf, or rather the reversion of the buff it got that made it so strong in the first place. Muzzle Break once again increases horizontal camera recoil by 10%. Horizontal recoil is considered harder to control than vertical recoil, which is exactly why many mid-ranks just mindlessly use compensator on literally every gun they have. However, the Muzzle Break was changed last year to no longer increase the horizontal recoil of any gun it is used on, which essentially just made it a completely free way of deleting 30% of your gun's vertical recoil. When weighing attachments, you have to consider that vertical recoil isn't just the gun's initial kick. Every auto has vertical and horizontal spread when spraying. For example, the MAC-10 does kick up a lot, but it doesn't just stop there. The gun still has a lot of vertical spread, and that's why Muzzle Break was so important before. You didn't really need to think when using it. Unless it was painfully obvious that a gun needed compensator, you could get away just fine with Muzzle Break and angled grip on almost any primary in the game. And yes, this included snipers and DMRs. In fact, it still does, because they were basically unaffected by this nerf. Muzzle Break is now no longer an attachment that you can just throw on any auto and it'll work fine. It's still pretty obvious when a gun would benefit most from it, such as the M16A4, which, by the way, got nerfed even harder than the M16A3 and is still probably the best assault rifle in the game, but I digress. The Uzi, or the AN94, as all of them just don't have any horizontal recoil to begin with. But part of what made the M16A3 so accurate before was Muzzle Break's huge vertical recoil reduction, resulting in a massive buff to the M16A3's recoil that made it nearly as accurate as the C7A2 anyway. The M16A3 still has a bit of horizontal recoil, so Muzzle Break isn't really the best barrel attachment for it anymore, because the M16A3, while it still does have fairly low recoil, isn't as much of a death laser as the M16A4, the Uzi, and the AN94 like I mentioned earlier in this video. But do you want to know what is a death laser? That's right, the C7A2. Despite having easily the lowest overall damage of any assault rifle, the C7A2 is and has always been a very powerful gun simply due to its excellent recoil control. Additionally, while the C7A2 is still very good and honestly borderline overpowered, It was not touched in any way by the M16 family nerfs, as the best barrel attachments for it have always been T-Break and Muzzle Booster. In other words, the C7A2 and all of its meta attachments have been completely untouched, and it is just as accurate as it's ever been. The question then is, if the C7A2's significantly better recoil is worth it, if the trade-off is having worse damage than the M16A3 across nearly all ranges, and even losing the ability to 5-shot at all ranges, having worse bullet penetration and basically requiring AP to make any use of what little penetration it still has, having slightly worse ADS speed, and not being able to use the collapsible stock attachment to increase the set ADS speed. Is it worth it? Well, maybe. It really depends on what you're looking for in an assault rifle. The M16A3 is a little less map dependent thanks to its higher penetration and its ability to kill in 5 shots to the body, unlike the C7A2. However, the C7A2 is much easier to use, and it's got a lot more flexibility in terms of what attachments you can use on it. So, let's look at what attachments you should be using on both it and the M16A3. For the M16A3, the best barrel attachment is now either T-Break or ARS suppressor. T-Break gives you solid recoil reduction with no downsides, while the ARS suppressor gives slightly more vertical recoil reduction, as well as keeping you off the radar, though this comes at the cost of reducing the M16A3's already nerfed minimum damage range, as well as making it handle a bit slower. For the underbarrel attachment, stubby grip is the best, as it is the best grip for reducing camera recoil on any gun that doesn't have Romanian grip. And by the way, you shouldn't ever use holding grip on anything right now, because it sucks! Anyways, blue laser helps reduce its camera recoil, but collapsible stock will give a nice bonus to the gun's handling, which is a very nice combo with ARS suppressor. Default ammo and armor piercing are both good options for the ammo type, unless you're using the M16A3's burst grouping attachment, which I'll cover in another video. Moving on to the C7A2's best attachments. Like I said earlier in this video, T-Break and Muzzle Booster are both very good here. T-Break is probably your best option if you don't want anything too crazy, but Muzzle Booster actually works great, especially now that it increases recoil less than before. A muzzle boosted C7A2 is still more accurate than most other assault rifles and is basically the same as the HK416 with 223, except for the fact that it doesn't suck. And finally, if you're a disgusting rank 200 who for some reason wants to erase a huge chunk of this gun's 5-shot range and make its already slow ADS speed even slower, all for like 4% less vertical recoil than T-Break, then you'll be dumb enough to use ARS suppressor on this gun, at which point you might as well just put a long barrel and angle grip on the MP5 and just get a more accurate version of this that can also 3-shot at close range. Anyways, the best grip here is always stubby grip. The C7A2, while quite accurate, is not accurate enough for angled grip. All you need for the other slot is a blue laser, as there aren't really many options here for the C7A2. And finally, just like the M16A3, default ammo or armor piercing is generally the best here, but the 7.62 conversion does turn this gun into a weaker version of the M14 and works very well with the LSW barrel, giving this gun amazing damage ranges. The great thing about the C7A2 is that it's a very flexible assault rifle and can roll with pretty much anything, so honestly just have fun messing around with the attachments for it, and you might find something cool. So, to answer the question in the title of the video, the C7A2 and the M16A3 are basically equal in terms of viability at the moment, and honestly it just comes down to which one you personally enjoy using more. The M16A3 nerf wasn't that significant at all, but it was just barely enough to bring the C7A2 back into the meta again, and at this rate I don't think either of these guns are quite safe from being nerfed. So yeah, that's my in-depth guide on 2 of the strongest assault rifles in the game. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and also join my Discord, which will be linked in the description. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.